I'm Alma Lee. I'm a psychotherapist and transformative lifestyle resiliency coach and author, and I want to help you reach your goals by teaching you how to step outside of those fear-based mindsets and into your powerful, loving self. Let's get started. Howdy folks, it's been a minute here from Fear to Love with Alma Lee. Let's get started. I have had a lot of time to get caught up and to really consider what my next episode was going to be. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that whatever it was going to be was not going to be forced. And that is absolutely the case today, because anytime that a topic of discussion comes into the front, the front of my mind or my experience or something that I observe in my life, it always comes with no effort. It's always organic. It's always something that I want to share with you as a measure of helping you to increase the quality of your life. And sometimes that can be challenging because it challenges you. It challenges you to think differently. It can also trigger you. You've heard of triggers. That's what we're going to talk about today, or rather what I'm going to talk about, and you can choose to listen or you can choose to pass. It's a heady topic. It's not something that everyone is ready for, but I promise you this: if you can withstand the next 20 to 25 minutes or so of me rambling on about this, I promise that you'll come out of the other side of this with some new perceptions. Your perception on your anger, perception on your relationships, perception on how you're interacting with people on a day-to-day basis. And I think you might be surprised with what I have to say about this topic. So without further ado, today's topic is triggers and how they can adversely affect our lives. We've all been there. We have all been in situations with people where somebody did something or they said something, and we became tearful, we became upset, we became angry, we had to leave the situation, or worse, maybe we got into trouble with that person, or trouble with the law, trouble with your employer, trouble in your relationship because of your response. I am here to tell you that regardless of the outcome of your behavior, now that's a different episode. That's more along the lines of being accountable for your behaviors, but understanding why you do the things that you do is key. Most of us, if we don't go to therapy, if we don't do any kind of spiritual healing, spiritual evolution, awakening, if we don't go through that process, many of us will exist in our lives trapped. We're trapped in our sadness, we're trapped in our depression, our anxiety, our anger, our hatred, our venom, and it's all deeply rooted in trauma. It's deeply rooted in the cognitions of our upbringing, of the environment that we were raised in. I'm here to help you understand yourself, and I'm also here to help you stay out of trouble by understanding why you respond the way you do, and it's because you're triggered. Now, it's not lost on me. I see it. It's kind of a catchphrase now, kind of a tongue-in-cheek, if you will, mindset of, oh, he's so triggered or she's so triggered. Yeah, it's true. People get triggered. People get triggered because when someone engages us in a way that causes us to have a visceral emotional reaction, whether that's anger, sadness, whatever, that's a trigger. That's a trigger. Here's the thing, guys. This is actually an opportunity. Hear me out. This is an opportunity for you to take a breath. This is why the deep breathing is so important. Like, one of the reasons anyway why deep breathing is so important, because it allows you the time to step away from a condition that's causing you emotional dysregulation that can get you into trouble. So when you do those deep breaths, when you find yourself angry or tearful, when you engage in that deep breathing process, you slow down the autonomic nervous system. You slow down. Let me slow down. You slow down your nervous system so that you are better capable of addressing the condition by which you are existing in. We're all vulnerable to triggers. But not all of us have the opportunity to understand why and what is triggering us. See, it wasn't until probably about 10 years ago, honestly, and I was coming out of grad school when I went through my own trauma therapy, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy. I went through my own EMDR therapy, where part of that therapy and part of that training, I actually did two parts. One was my actual therapy work, the therapy that I had for my own existence in my own trauma. And two, the training I got as a better way of understanding how the therapy itself works. I think maybe I got a little bit more benefit from the actual training as a therapist than the actual experience, because now I understand the mechanics of it and why triggers are such a predominant facet in our lives, and we don't even realize it. Here's the thing. Let me just break it down real simply. When you exist in a condition, now, trigger warning, right? If something's upsetting for you, I may talk about something that might trigger you. I'm just saying it. Just be forewarned. Imagine, think back on your childhood. Think about a condition that made you feel shameful. It hurt your feelings. It made you feel abandoned. It gave you a sense of an emotional space that made you extremely uncomfortable, whether that was tearfulness, anger, you name it, fear. Think about that existence in that condition. And if you existed in that space as a child, well, most likely you felt powerless to that condition. As a result, your mindset becomes conditioned to avoid that situation. It's real simple. It's the reptilian brain that causes us to prevent us from getting into that situation again. It's a protective measure. It's actually there to protect us. So we remember it and we get programmed to avoid those conditions. So obviously, as an adult, if you haven't gone through therapy, if you haven't gone through some kind of awareness, training, evolution, healing, spiritual awakening, you name it, if you have not had the opportunity to engage in some type of evolution of self, then most likely conditions that mimic or resemble your childhood condition that caused you to feel fearful and powerless will reenact. It's like a replay of those feelings, which is the trigger. So that's why you see people who get angry or tearful in situations that seem like, wow, that person's really lost their mind. Like, why did he get so angry? Or why did she get so sad? Or why is she bawling her eyes out? Or why is he punching that guy or that wall or whatever? See, that's a trigger. And if this is you, if this is something that you have grown accustomed to as far as accepting it as a feature of your personality, I am here to tell you that that is not necessarily your future, my friend. If that's something that you want to work out of, you can. There are modalities, there's therapies out there available. I'm a big fan of EMDR. I am a huge fan of EMDR. EMDR saved me in a lot of ways, and EMDR has saved many of my clients in a lot of ways because it helps you to disentangle your emotional response from your trauma. That's really basically what it does, and without getting into too much of the weeds on that, suffice it to say, if you find yourself getting triggered, if you find yourself exposed to experiences that mimic how you felt as a child, that's a trauma, and that is a triggered response. It's not your fault. I mean, I know that sounds cliche as hell, but it's literally not your fault that you're triggered. You have an opportunity here to understand yourself and why you behave the way you do. There's an enormous amount of shame attached to anyone who experiences an elevated or a dysregulated emotional response to a particular condition, to the point where they feel they have to avoid certain situations, people, conditions. You know, you've met that person, that person that can't really be trusted once they start consuming alcohol because they can keep everything in a pocket while they're sober. But once they start drinking, all bets are off. You know that person. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're that person that gets wildly out of control whenever alcohol or any type of vice or condition comes into play. But you can absolutely do something about your triggers. Ask yourself this: have you experienced problems keeping relationships intact because of your triggered responses? I mean, I know I have experienced some triggers when it comes to disrespect. Now, I discovered this when I went through my own EMDR therapy and my training, was I isolated what it was that caused me to become dysregulated. For me, by and large, it's disrespect. Disrespect on any level makes me just lose it. Like, I would just completely lose control. I acknowledge it now, and I will say this: the trigger itself does not hold me hostage, but it's still there. It's just, I recognize it, and I also understand that I have to remove myself from the engagement, whatever it is that's causing me to feel that way, so that I can regain my composure, and that I can feel less disempowered and regain my sense of self and and regulate my nervous system. But yeah, disrespect. But the thing is that disrespect should not be tolerated at all by anybody. So that's kind of a forefront of the methods that I preach to my clients and to pretty much anybody that listens to this podcast or the talk show. But yeah, disrespect is a huge trigger. It's a huge trigger for a lot of people, not just me. And it comes from the feeling of being minimized, marginalized, put down, just kind of disregarded, seen as unseen, and not having any worthiness. And that's the trigger, at least for me anyway. So what is your trigger? What is it that causes you to come out of your regulated space? What is it that causes you to feel tearful or angry or lose your mind? I think of the movie Back to the Future with Marty McFly, when anytime anybody called him yellow, remember that? When they would, tease him, what's the matter, McFly, you chicken? And then he would just lose his mind because that was a trigger for him, because he didn't want anyone to feel that he was not courageous. I find it interesting, though, because I don't think that they ever really dug into that aspect of Marty McFly and where that trigger came from. But at any rate, it was there, and that's definitely a good example of what a trigger looks like. What are your triggers? What do you think is the cause of your emotional dysregulation? Now, a lot of things can trigger us, and it could be something that's not even remotely related to a person. It can be smells. I have worked with a lot of clients over the years who experienced childhood sexual trauma, or any kind of trauma for that matter. And the person that perpetrated the abuse or the trauma or the traumatic event was wearing a particular cologne, or there was a certain odor in the air when the trauma happened. That is a visceral reaction that a lot of people, and the body response to a particular smell can cause that feeling of fear and dread to kind of wash over them. Again, trauma work, EMDR therapy can all help to disentangle some of the emotional responses to those conditions. The point is, there's help. You don't have to live your life like this. That's the whole point of this episode, is that you do not have to go through your entire life feeling out of control, feeling like a smell or a person or a behavior has complete and total control over your nervous system. You don't. There is help out there. I just want to reassure you of that. And you can live a fulfilling life. You can live an existence where you are not held hostage by these conditions. And I encourage you to seek out those opportunities. If you have just a simple Google search, actually, trauma therapy, you can type in your zip code, and it can help you find local resources, trauma therapists that can help you disentangle. It's a lot of hard work. I'm not going to lie to you. It is a lot of hard work, but it's worth it. Don't you think? Don't you think it's worth being able to get up in the morning and live your life without worrying that you're going to have to be on guard or on defense at every moment? That's a heightened level of your cortisol, your stress hormone, throughout your day, all of that anxiety, all of it. All of it. Don't you want it to go away? Don't you want to feel like your life is something that can be enjoyed in peace and have the freedom of knowing you can move freely and not worry that, passing a stranger on the street who is wearing the same cologne as your perpetrator is not going to send you into just a deep, dark space for a few days? There is help out there, and you can absolutely find a space where you don't have to be held hostage. That's ultimately the message that I want to send to you today. I've done a lot of work on myself. I've worked a lot over the years with therapists to help pull myself out of my own problematic behaviors. And I got to say, the whole disrespect, feeling disrespected by someone, feeling disregarded, has sent me into a spiral on numerous occasions where I felt that I was not seen, and it was mimicking those experiences in my childhood. And I would do this wash, rinse, repeat in my personal relationships where I would challenge people. And the thing is, honestly, I know what I was doing now. Hindsight's 2020, and I look back on those conditions and those experiences, and I really know that ultimately all I was trying to do was stand up to my father. That's really what it was, is when I felt disrespected by someone, I would take that as a measure of, I'm not going to let this happen again. And I would, in turn, create this unnecessary traumatic event potentially for that other person, and become this, unbridled a-hole at times that ran off at the mouth and just lost my mind in a condition, in a situation. And then on the other side of it, once I became emotionally regulated again, I could look back on it and be like, yeah, that was probably overboard. Is that you? Do you do that? Listen, the only shame to be had in any of this is to not be accountable. That's it. When we know better, we do better. And a big part of addressing your triggers and healing is being accountable to how your triggers have caused you to behave, particularly in the relationships that you have with your loved ones and those people around you. Nobody likes an asshole. Nobody wants to be around somebody like that. Nobody wants to be around somebody who is contentious and reactive all the time, and people have to walk on eggshells around them. If that's you, I just encourage you to take a breath, take a step back, and ask for help. And look at what your triggers are. What is it that's setting you off? And how can you do better? Because when you do better, everything improves. When you know better, you do better. And your life improves exponentially. And I encourage you today to consider, when you think back of any entanglement that you've had with anyone, stranger, loved one, coworker, doesn't matter, and think about it. Was that out of pocket? Was that a response that I had due to a trigger? Was it something where I magnified being violated because of what I experienced in the past? Was that a triggered response? Was I emotionally dysregulated in that situation? And I think that you'll find that there's a lot of situations that you can improve on. And I tell my clients this all the time is, you have to look at the things that you've done, especially if it's a direct result of your own unhealed trauma. And you have to say, okay, this is a mess that I have made as a result of my trauma, as a result of my trigger. And I have to love myself through this. I have to be accountable to the people I have harmed and love and respect myself through this. Because if you are self-deprecating, you're not healing, you see. So you have to love yourself. You have to respect yourself. You have to understand what your triggers are. You have to understand how your triggers have caused you to act irrationally in your dysregulated state that has caused harm to other people. What messes do you need to clean up? And then clean them up without minimizing yourself, without further triggering yourself, by being respectful and loving toward yourself, by understanding that you're not a bad person, that you are merely in survival mode in order to overcome those conditions. So like I said, guys, this is a heady topic. It's a lot, but there's opportunity there for healing and for a lot of growth for a lot of us. So I wish you all the best in finding out what your triggers are and doing better and loving yourself as you grow through this and just living that joy-filled life that you're entitled to live, just like the rest of us. And that's really it. Know what your triggers are and know what your triggers are causing you to do, and you can grow. All right. From Fear to Love. This has been an LBM production. Please like, subscribe, and share this show. Thanks for listening.